returns a snippet of current audio of some length.
Correct.
So, but it returns that from the moment you ask it to the moment it thinks it's finished recording.
Exactly.
Okay. Network packet recording. Okay, so network packet recording takes a certain amount of time. Current audio, I have to say, this looks wrong to me. I mean, I would have thought the one argument form would be a duration. Because the source, hasn't the source been set externally somehow? Shoddy?
We could set up, we could accept duration as the first argument as well. So either of those two could be optional.
Right. I mean, if you want to look at an existing function, right, there's current image.
Right. But current image is just a one-shot deal.
No,
That's
it's not.
true.
You can ask for some number of images.
What did I just find? What just happened here? Am I going crazy? Or did this...
No, stick a ref in front of it. It's a filed bug in the prototype build.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm in the prototype build here?
Or maybe it's also in, master builds, or nightlies, but it got filed this morning.
Who wants to be the new model for current image? Somebody in the image processing team, surely.
Next tech conference, we'll take care of it.
What's that?
Sure. Next.
At the tech conference, we can have people try
audition for the next documentation image.
Right. Okay. In any case, okay. So this returns n sequential images as a list. So how long apart are those images?
Depends on the frame rate that is specified in the device properties.
So in other words, it's at the frame rate. It's
exactly.
n things at the frame rate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sensible? Yeah, go ahead.
The one minor difference here, I don't know how network packet recording works. You know that when we start the camera gets going for 2 minutes before it shuts down or before the timeout is over. And if you ask for current image bracket, you get one sample back. Then a few seconds later, you ask for current image of 10. If the buffer already has the 10 frames, we return 10 latest frames from the buffer.
Ugh.
That we can as well change, but it takes...
I mean, that's not even documented, is it? So, I mean,
no.
How does that relate to the whole device read and device read latest and so on? What is happening here? I got to use the node.
Documentation search is broken, so you need to put in the ref.
Okay. All right. Okay. You already said that twice. Let me see if I can actually remember it this time. Okay. Device read latest, right? I'm using the current version. Great. Okay. So what does this do? That's the most recently collected items.
So that's equivalent to, that's equivalent to current image n if the camera is already started. Otherwise,
what do you mean if the camera is previously started?
Previously, yes. Otherwise, we'll have to start the camera, fill in the buffer, get to the end image, and then return the list.
Okay, but don't we have a device read buffer which reads the complete contents of the buffer on a device, right? Which is what you're saying. If the thing if you had been collecting things for whatever random reason in the camera, this would read that stuff and empty the buffer, correct?
I haven't tested it, but yes, that seems like a sensible behavior.
Okay, but I don't think, we got to decide, are we looking at the past or the future with these functions?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, we can guarantee to look at the future. The past, we might not have. Humph. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got current image, which looks either at past or future. We've got current audio, conceptually of a duration. Current image, notice, is not of a duration, it's of a frame count.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We could still accept the duration, time quantity there as well. which probably makes sense for something like current video down the road or something.
Sorry, I wasn't. I lost it. What did you just say?
I'm saying we can accept a time quantity as well instead of n, or
Okay.
in addition to n. So that as well could be, yeah, a duration.
Okay. Current network packet capture or something. Well, no, image capture is the analog of current network packets, I suppose.
Right.
Ugh.
I mean, so I will. My argument is twofold. One is we have some precedent with current image, and there was already thought to extend that to current audio, current video, and so forth. The other is, I don't know that I could tell you the difference between network packet capture and network packet recording. I mean, I could, but it's not like I could remember.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. What have we done with the thing that was going to be called audio recording?
So audio recording or audio record is a different thing, because that says to start record right now, right? It's like there's an audio record and a complementary audio pause, and I presume an audio stop, right? Those are like the buttons. That's like the record button on the stream.
Actions on the stream.
Yes.
Sorry. I got distracted for a second. Could you say that again?
So we have an audio stream object, which could be linked to a speaker, a playback device, or a recording device.
Okay.
And then we have controlled functions that control the stream, like audio play, audio pause,
Yeah, I
audio
understand.
stop,
So there's also
audio
video
record.
stream. I mean, you could imagine if you really wanted to get obsessive about it, you could have a network packet stream. Or is that not the case?
It's a little bit difficult to do it in a stream. I guess you could in theory.
It seems weird, but because in the case of a video stream, it's pretty obvious what it means to playback. It's pretty obvious what it means to record it. All right, look, but bottom line, it seems to I kind of agree with you, Atai, that the current network packets make sense in, an analogy to these things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose we could do the thing of having n or time here. And then we could do, current audio, I don't even know what on earth there we've just got to have a time, right? I don't really think n makes, there is the sample rate, of course, right? There's some number of samples.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose we could do the same thing there. Now, I have to say, in terms of device, doesn't current image have a device, a way of changing the device? It does, doesn't it? But isn't that current imaging device or something?
Imaging device, not current.
Okay. So, but that's part of the options. So I don't understand why that's not what you're doing for current audio.
So audio input device, audio output. Okay, sure, we can do that.
I would think so, because then we can have $1, because there we have $1 imaging device. We can have $1 audio device, because most of the time you're just going to want to set it for a given session.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm good with this.
Okay.
So this network packet trace also seems quite sensible. This was a ridiculous name here.
Yes. And yes, I was in between when I created this agenda. Apparently there was a meeting in which it was already renamed, which is what's in the little comma there with the...
Okay. All right. Fine. All right. We're good. Okay. Are we ready for the next item?
Yep. So open.
And anybody who is only relevant for this first item can leave if they want. Anybody who's needed for, what the heck is this?
Itai, you want me for $1 username or?
Then let's skip. Let's talk about this one, because I'm really curious what this one is, and then we'll skip to that one and let Shadi go after that.
Okay. So open terminal.app and execute that.
How horrified am I going to be?
I think you'll be pleased.
Okay. That's always a change. Okay.
Oh, it's not pointing at a recent build. You need a newer build.
I have a version of that. Maybe somebody has to ask Roger Dooley what it is. Does anybody remember what the I always have a new version. What is it called? Garrett, do you know what the new version is here?
I'm not sure what it's called. There was also a bug in, I think it might have been today's Wolfram script, so I don't know if that'll help us either.
All right, why don't I look at your
why
screen?
don't I share? Can I share for a minute and then?
Yep, go ahead.
Where's share? Okay. And there's my. All right, we see.
Did you take that picture, Atai? No, all I see is a big mountainside.
Oh, okay. This must
Nice
be
picture. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So that is a cat crying tears of joy.
That's a wonderful cat.
Yes.
How impressive.
So
I'm impressed that the terminal can render it.
Yes. So I've actually tested it. I've been testing it across different terminals. So the Mac terminal can do it. A Linux terminal can do it. The Windows terminal can't do it, but if you use something like Cygwin, then it can do it. So, and there's still bugs here. So, for example, if I do Wolfram script and I try to paste in this thing into terminal, I'm hitting Command V and nothing's happening.
But is that for us, or is that? I mean, is that anything to do with us?
That's a bug for us because
why?
Because if I turn off input history and
I've never seen that option before. Garrett, what is that option?
It's an option to the kernel.
But it's an undocumented option to Wolfram script, isn't it?
No, well, it's an option to the kernel.
Okay. That's
right.
passed through.
Yep.
Yes. Which disables the arrow keys in history. So I can't.
Yeah, I get it.
Right. So clearly there's
nice
some
option. Yeah, it's a good option. And by the way, we should document it.
Okay. And so there's clearly some bug.
Okay, so there's some bug there. Yep.
Yep.
But so the main takeaway here is that non-plain zero Unicode is starting to work.
Correct.
Do you know if it works on the command line? If I pass it through the shell command line?
I presume it will. Here
actually, that's what you. No, it isn't what you're doing here. In other words, if you resolve the from character code there, and if the dash code is of the emoticon.
Right. So yeah. So if you, yes. So if I do something like echo the cat and pipe that to Wolfram script, then it will correctly interpret the cat.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. So other than being happy, what is the next step here? What do we need?
Right. So all right. So we have UTF-8. All right. So okay. So there are a few different steps. One is the cloud, and I've talked to June, and she's going to be testing. We have no idea what will happen when we try connecting this kernel to the cloud. So that's just an experiment that needs to happen. And
okay, so let me just understand that. So the issue is whether the cloud notebook editor can pass non-plain zero Unicode. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And another question is whether the APIs, whether the plumbing through Tomcat of the APIs and so on will work.
Right.
Which I think are two, and even a third question is whether when you have an instant form that's been put up by the cloud, whether its smart fields will correctly pass this stuff.
Right. And I don't know enough about the internals of any of those things to even hazard a guess.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that there are going to be some bumps.
Yeah.
Do we know whether, like, does interpreter eat these things okay or not?
Haven't tried interpreter, but
if it's a semantic interpreter, then it's going to be then the alpha server is going to be an obstacle, right?
Oh, that's right.
Well, you're going to have to put some protection in for that, probably, for the time being, so we don't end up messing something up horribly. Jeremy.
Yeah, I can think about that.
Right.
Right. So the front end the master front end currently doesn't support these characters at all. If you
I understand, but that's presumably coming.
Right. So in the prototype build, John has started fixing some things, but that's at most 25% done. So it will work in a few places and be horribly broken in other places.
All right. But so who is project managing the process of getting this, even inventorying where this has to work, and then making sure it does in each case? Who has the list of where it's supposed to work? Who's project managing here?
Sushma.
Okay. Well, between you and Parth, I think you should figure out who is making that master list. Okay, and I think we already gave you a bunch of places.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you another place, which is reading these from files. I have no idea how that possibly works.
So if you import the file as UTF-8, then it will work.
I understand, but okay. So what you're saying is, okay. So let me just list you a few other ones. Service connections, like for example, reading off a Twitter feed. I have no idea how that's encoded. I have no reason to think that it's UTF-8. Does anybody have any idea here?
A lot of web APIs are UTF-8, so
yeah.
I was going to say, it wouldn't surprise me if, like, say, Twitter was standardized, hard enough that they forced an encoding.
Right. Okay. Let me give you some other, just totally random, other weird cases, like EXIF data for images. No idea how that's encoded. Shadi, any idea? No. Okay. Well, look, I think the main thing is any place where we're getting something from the outside world that is string-like, we have to worry about it. And my guess is there will be a bug tail that will last for a while with these things.
Right. I mean, I think,
here's another one that's interesting. Sorry, is rasterize. I don't even know what fonts, when rasterizes, it's presumably using system fonts, and presumably on the popular platforms there are standardized fonts for most of the emoji, but I don't know, under Linux are there emoji fonts?
Yes.
How does we're getting off track here, but I'm going to ask a question. So, we were involved in the original Unicode 1.0 standard back in the 1990s, and we even added some of our own characters to it, except we didn't even try for the wolf. But in the modern times, there's a progressive advance of emoji. How does that work time-wise? Does anybody know? I mean, so people say we want an emoji that's a picture of a strawberry or something, and then somehow the Unicode consortium agrees that they're going to have an emoji of a strawberry. But then how does that work in terms of the release of that and the release of fonts that support it and so on? Anybody have any idea?
So so I think once a year or so, maybe Unicode updates a version, updates the standard, so that they officially publish a standard saying, new in this version, code point 1234556 is my favorite strawberry, and the glyph should look vaguely like this.
Yep.
And then the OS vendors will then subsequently issue an update saying we now support Unicode law, and that will include fonts which.
Yeah, I understand. I don't think that can be completely correct, but we shouldn't speculate because some people will actually know the answer to this. But I think, hasn't Apple sort of excited people by introducing, various kinds of politically correct emoji and so on? And how did they do that? Is that in private Unicode space? And if it is in private Unicode...
No, they go through the consortium.
For everything?
As far as I know. They propose...
Okay, fair enough, fine. I mean, then the other possibility is that we might need to go and look at some, if we had to curate what the structure of some stuff in private Unicode space is, then so be it. Another question is, given that we're expanding our Unicode coverage, does anybody know, again, this is the wrong group of people, but this is something for Sushma to chase down, and maybe we need a separate meeting about this non-plain zero Unicode stuff. I mean, you know, fonts for cuneiform and God knows what else, right? Do we have that stuff? Is there, does anybody know? Because, for example, for rasterization, it's simply not going to work unless somewhere we have that font. It's also not obvious that in some of these very exotic fonts, and given that we have cloud connectivity, that we shouldn't just go to the cloud to get some rasterization done if we're sufficiently out of fonts on a local machine.
Well, I mean, anything that's not explicitly in one of our table, we will use system fonts for.
Yeah,
and
but there aren't system fonts for all Unicode code points, are there?
There's system fonts for an awful lot of them.
So if I were to pick, I mean, if I were to simply say, I mean, right now this is not in this is not far out in Unicode space, but if I were to just say, whoops, I don't mean that. I definitely don't mean random real. And I would say from character code here. Okay, so I'm getting a hit rate. I'm getting a failed glyph rate. See that failed glyph rate?
Right, but how many of those?
They all exist.
Right.
Everything in your code has been filled in. Let's find out. Hold on one second. Let's just for the hell of it, let's figure
What's the
out.
shamrock?
I have no idea what the shamrock is. The fact that it's green is totally remarkable. Okay, let's look at that. Okay, that guy there. Okay, let's say 2-character code of that. Okay, that's, oh, is that in private Unicode space?
I think so. It's certainly close to private Unicode space.
Try pasting it into like text edit or something.
Okay, all right, I'll do that in just a second. Oops, well, fine. Okay, that is not in private Unicode space. So let's find out. So you say I should paste this into text edit. What's this that I've got? I've got a shell here. Should I paste it into that? What the heck is that doing? Blah. Well, I think I just don't have that font, right?
Well, the question is, what is the A95E, right? I mean, if that's, for example, in the surrogate pair space, then there's no character, right? Not every code point is actually a useful character.
Okay.
Right. Code point 0 is null. That's not exactly the most interesting glyph in the world.
Okay, so if I ask Wolfram Alpha what character that is, it says, what the heck is rejang? And look, we can't even render it here. I thought we had bitmaps of everything. What is this? Oh, you know what? What is this? Well, okay, it's a separate topic, but we got to go chase down what's going on there.
That is a non-spacing combining mark.
Which just doesn't have a visual form.
Right.
Okay, but then we're displaying it wrong here because if it doesn't have a visual form, it's not like we should be displaying it as a question mark. We should just be displaying it.
Well, but you'll notice that, you know, your terminal did the same rendering. That this is...
Oh, that was the one I was just looking at. Okay.
Right. I mean, so I don't think it's us drawing that question mark. I think it's the OS font system
saying I have no font with this code point at this code point.
Okay, what is this? We say the visual form is a pi or a pi-like character in Wolfram Alpha, and yet here we're saying we don't know what it is. It is notable that we don't have any. Oh, it's a private use area. Oh gosh. Okay, who knows? I'll try just one more.
Right. So there are two levels of support. There's being able to handle the code point and not corrupt the code point, and that's the level where say the front end is going to strive to be. I can accept this code point and I will not turn it into another character, and I will display something that vaguely resembles that. Then there's a second level, which is to semantically understand the code point, if there is something to semantically understand. And, right, because there are character code points which are, say, start rendering from right to left until you hit, my opposite.
Yeah, I understand.
And so, so that means we would, the front end, first of all, we need to decide what that even means in the front end. And then the front end would need to learn all these characters and what to do with them. And that's
I understand. And there's things like, is it a letter-like character? Those kinds of things, which are going to have to be covered, right? Is letter Q true or false for an emoji?
Right. And, let's find out.
Okay. Now, by the way, why is the shamrock green? That seems extremely exotic. Okay. Well, in any case, all right. Look, the main thing for Sushma and Parth is to go inventory what all the places these strings can get in and out are. And then I think separately we need to find out what's happened, what's going on with fonts. Yeah, were you going to say yes? What?
Yes, I mean there are a few other things. So, for example, right now we have character in the binary right. We have character 8 and character 16.
Yes.
So presumably we should also have a character 32.
I think so. Sounds right to me.
Is that maybe something Garrett could work on?
Garrett, somebody associated with Garrett could work on. Is Garrett still here, or did we send Garrett away? No.
I'm still here. I'd possibly. So
is that a Dave Librick thing?
I'm wondering how much work it needs to be changed.
I would think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether there's any Endianness nonsense going on with it. Okay. Anyway,
well, we can look at the current character 16 and just
right. Let's move on. I think it's clear what we do here. The thing we're going to need for a meeting specifically about Plane 1 Unicode, which I don't necessarily have to be in, is that inventory of where it goes in and where it comes out.
Right, well,
makes sense?
Okay.
Yes. Then also, I mean, other things we're missing are, UTF-16. Do we want Big Endian and Little Endian versions thereof? We don't have UTF-32.
We probably need those things, but how are you going to parameterize the Big and Little Endian versions with different names?
Well, we could either give little different names, right? So we could have a Big Endian, we could have a UTF-16, which is just plain, follow the current Endianness or possibly.
That sounds sensible to me.
And then the question is, do we also want separate names which force the Endianness, or? I
think so. But what have we done with Endianness for other data types, for other raw data types? What are we doing with Endianness in the language client libraries? Do you know? That's a Dorian thing.
Yeah,
All right, this is not for this meeting. Let's go track down. It's a good question, but let's track it down and then talk about it once it's tracked down.
Okay.
Okay, shall we move on? We're going to do the last item here, this $username. Yeah, yes. I mean, this is in the, my claim about language is words always get smooshed. And what we currently have is $username with a capital N, right?
Right. So here's the question. And if you've updated the documentation in the last couple of hours, then
I'm not sure I have in the last couple of hours. Shall I do it?
Let me see. My commit was probably you should update.
Okay.
And
okay, so what am I going to see here?
Right. So the problem is that, right, we can't have a page for $username and for $username. And because you can't have two different pages which differ only in case on a case-insensitive file system like you have on your Mac. So my suggestion, so I put in a future, I mean, I'll need to go and like rewrite the whole page with the correct case and everything. But what I put on the page was a tentative note which says something like, for compatibility with earlier versions of the Wolfram language, $username can also be, is also available in the variable $user capital name.
That's fine. Where are you going to put it in the details section?
Exactly.
I think that's fine.
Yeah. So if you if
I don't have a problem. I mean, it's kind of ugly, and it's not the best thing, but language evolves, and I think we have to take account of that. We also need to make sure the autocompleter understands this properly.
Okay.
Right.
And arguably, the autocompleter, if you say this, the autocompleter should still be trying to complete it as this one, if it can.
Okay.
If that's a a major issue, then handle it differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment we update the documentation so that the documented form is $user lowercase name, then that will automatically bump it higher in the.
Okay, fine. All right, then let's assume that that's going to be okay.
Sorry, one question. Do those things represent the same thing?
They do.
Yeah, because I would say username is kind of my name, while the other one with lowercase is the username I use to log in.
That's right. This one is the computeroidal username.
Right, and we don't need the other one.
Well, we do, because we've had the other one for how many years?
22.
Okay, fine.
I mean, but do we need to store the name, the actual full name of the user?
We do, but that's a completely different variable.
Oh, I see. So what's going to be the name of this other one? Storing the full name?
I've forgotten, but there is another. Maybe we already have it. It's odd that we don't already have that there. And by the way, this should point to authentication dialog and various other kinds of things. This $username symbol. Okay. I don't remember what it is called.
Okay, but yeah,
it's something like $personal name.
I see. Okay, fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see here we're saying username, password, lowercase n. All right. Anyway, okay, it sounds okay to me. All right. That was the thing that Shadi was needed for. I don't quite know why Shadi was involved in that at all, but anyway.
Because the motivation for this came from mail and other functions that.
Oh, okay, fine. All right. So should we move on to the next thing? Shadi can leave if she wants to, but is welcome to stay. Okay, we have many kinds of missing with different string arguments.
Yeah, so this is some email that you apparently sent to Sushma, and I presume you're talking about some sort of print form for missing.
I think I am, yes.
But we were not able to decipher what it is you're asking for here.
Okay, so what I'm asking for example, in dataset for its sins, it is displaying missing as just a dash.
Because that's the traditional form of missing.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I'm asking for the standard form whether we think that there is a better, more blob-like thing. Because I mean, something like this, missing key absent, seems kind of ugly. And it seems kind of like, I mean, I'm wondering whether this would better be some more graphical form, some so-called iti blob. I mean, it would be more obvious if you saw it. You know, if you have something where there's ABC and then missing a blah, 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 this just looks like something ugly, whereas I don't see why we can't have some typeset form for this.
Okay, but you don't have any particular thought as to what that form should be.
Well, not yet. I mean, you know, and the other question is whether key absent should be decameled and things, and whether it should be something that is more like, you know, because I mean, if we were going entity like, which wouldn't be a totally crazy pattern. Oh boy, this is a version that doesn't support this probably. Help. This is probably going to crash in some horrible way. But anyway, we all know that that will be display as New York City with camel with yeah, great. That, you know, that will display in some reasonable way, but yet underneath it's got cameled stuff, right? So I'm suggesting that, and I don't know what color it should be. Maybe it's a ghost color or something, some kind of gray ghost color or some such other thing. Not
yeah,
sure.
I wasn't sure if it was going to be a grayish or like an orangish or reddish or something.
I see. I think it should be, I think missing is more of a, yeah, I mean, so if we have that, but the input form there is something much more like, you know, the missing camel case thing. Well, what kind of motif? What's the right motif? Maybe the right motif is, and now I'm getting a little crazy, that some kind of, what about a, well, we need the design folk here if we're really going to do this. I'm, you know, what about a dotted red line around a gray thing? There's my crazy compromise design. That makes sense?
Right, although we use missing in much more than just entities. I'm not sure we want to give it.
No, I'm not talking about entities. I'm nothing to do with entities. I'm just saying, as a pattern here for what it might look like, I'm suggesting gray with a dotted red border.
Oh, so not the entity border, like just plain.
No, I'm just using this as a
okay. So
design.
that was my misunderstanding.
Right, he's just looking at the rounded rect of entity, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's my suggestion. Let's take it to design for further discussion there.
Okay.
Okay, what is this?
Okay, so this is something that was apparently started at some years ago and then sort of abandoned. It has, if you open, if you just highlight.
Do we have people in this meeting who know about this thing?
If Lou is still here.
Yes. I mean, I know about it. So it was intended to be it was intended to do for grid what plot and list plot did for graphics.
Okay, why doesn't
so if you remove the list, then that would work.
So that's a different function. That's experimental tabulate.
Okay.
And then
why did we never finish this?
I don't know that.
Right.
That I don't remember. I think part of it is that specifying headings got quite complicated.
It's probably less complicated in the world of associations.
Possibly.
I mean, because I think we were doing this before associations were a thing.
Right. And so, you know, we get these various suggestions about, you know,
cleaning up data set, for example.
I'm not going to be anywhere near the bravest to attempt to clean up that mess, but
or add support for association directly to column, for instance, has been a suggestion in the past.
Right. So my idea is that this is sort of, I mean, forget the names, but that these functions are sort of the right level of abstraction, right? You can give it a list or a matrix or an association, and it will have a, you know, theme, a whatever, you know, not plot, but a table theme.
Yep.
And so I, you know.
By the way, I do think we might consider just generalizing plot theme and all the other themey things to just a theme option. I think that is going to be possible. I mean, maybe we should look at that, see whether there's any obstruction to doing that. Okay, that was a separate branch, but in here, I mean, this does look like it should be finished, and the whole headings thing could be done with associations, so we don't have to get hairy. I mean, the old table form thing had a bunch of headings mechanisms that I consider to be, I mean, this is the shocking thing. Those were designed like 31 years ago. The fact that they're not really embarrassing is wonderful, but they're definitely not as modern as they could be. They're not terrible, but it seems like in modern times with associations, we should just use those to define the headings, because that way the headings are fully computable. That makes sense? Everybody's silent.
Makes sense to me.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree that we should support associations, and we support, automatically, inferring headings, but I don't know that, I don't think that's, I don't think that replaces the need for manually specifying headings. I can conceive of
Fair enough. No, I agree that one might want an overlay of some other heading.
Right. But
okay,
yes.
So what's the question here? The question here is, are we going to jump in and try and finish these?
Basically. So there are two questions. Basically, are you signing off on the idea of trying to finish these and put all the various suggestions of, how do I make an association in a table and blah, blah, into these two functions? And then
who would do the work? Is it Lou or somebody else?
I think it would be either me or Itai for the low-level stuff, and then for the theme support, we might want to involve
probably Tim or somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, but how does this relate to the work that's being done on dataset? Can we somehow combine these efforts?
I don't know if there's anyone in this meeting that can answer that.
Jose would be the closest to that.
Was Jose here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have an opinion about that, if you've been paying attention to this? The question is whether Javier's work on Xavier, however he says it, is
So yes, so I have been following the discussion. So what I would say is that so far he is still mainly fixing bugs, not so much extending into new functionality.
No, I understand. But for example, here, if we said list tabulate will be expected to page, probably yes. Do you see what I'm saying? And by the time we're paging this, that's very close to some of the dataset functionality.
I see.
Is that really what we want? I'm not sure that's what we really want, or at least it's not obvious that that's something we want by default.
Not obvious. I agree. It's not obvious. But it might be something that we, I mean, do we expect? Okay, so the point of list tabulate is it is a smarter column, so to speak. Is that right?
Right. The point of list tabulate is that it is a smarter column or grid or table form, depending on what input or one input you give it.
Okay, and if I do three-way, what's it going to do?
Probably nothing. Or stop it.
Okay. That's not totally stupid. Yeah, but I mean, so this thing. Okay. Yeah, I agree that this is a perfectly reasonable thing. List tabulate is a bit of an odd name for that construct because, tabulate makes perfect sense. And it's clearly a useful function, although people are going to want to go from the tabulated form. And what happens if I make a tabulated form and then I say, oh, whoops, I want to compute from it? What do they do then?
Compute with what aspects of it?
The contents. Let's say I say, this is wonderful.
Excluding the headings.
That's correct.
Right. So there would have to be some. So there are two possibilities. One is there would have to be some additional function that would be wrapped around this that would extract just the core, or the other is that that this would immediately evaluate to just the core.
Right. So
what do you mean by immediately evaluate? You mean
so this output would not, if you were to evaluate this output as input?
No, that's too fragile. That's way too fragile. I mean, unfortunately, one is slippery. One's quickly going down the slippery slope of. We got a bunch of background noise, by the way, of data set. Right, that you're going to want something just like data set here. Because this is what data set is doing. It is formatting, and then it is providing something that has well-defined, operations that can be done on it.
Right, which is why I think the list tabulate form is the more interesting / useful thing, right? Because I can do the tabulate form. Well, I guess modulo headings. I guess it has some extra support for nicely making headings. But right, I can basically make the tabulate form by wrapping list tabulate around table.
Yes, although except for the headings.
Right. But I think sort of, right,
But right. I'm sorry, but you see list tabulate as a one-way output form. Is that correct?
Yes. It is super grid, right? It's like, as Lou said at the beginning, it is to grid and column as plot is to graphics. So it takes some input and generates a.
Yeah, I get it. I agree. Yeah. I mean, that was the original concept of this function like 10 years ago or something.
And why wouldn't be this like an equivalent of matrix form, like another form thing? Tabular form, say?
Which has the property that it is a wrapper where the assignment of the input line is to the core of the thing. The assignment of the output line, rather, is to the core. Is that the point you're making?
Well, I was thinking of using it exactly like table form, like table form or matrix form.
Right, where the actual content here, if I ask for %, I will get the inner thing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what hasn't been done for one of those is to have options for the display. I mean, also, that only works.
That's not completely true, right? I mean, table form has options like heading and what.
I see. And what would happen? So it would just say / table form as the kind of qualitative version of that for the output descriptor. Okay. So even though there are options there, that the label does not record the options. Right?
Right. I mean, right, column and grid are not forms.
They're not. No, but if you pick them up, in other words, if I made that a grid, then the % of that is the grid itself, which is the correct thing.
Right. And so I'm just saying, generally speaking, people are confused by forms. And given that we're thinking of this more as I guess the question is, are we thinking of this as a replacement for column and grid, or are we thinking of this as a replacement to table form? Because if we're thinking of it as a replacement for column and grid, it shouldn't be a print form.
I don't think it is a replacement for any of them. I think it's I think if anything, it is serving the type of use that table form serves. But the point is that table form is a very primitive creature compared to data set. Because data set is both something with evaluation semantics and display. And, you know, we're teaching people to use dataset, and dataset, in a sense, does a lot of the functionality of list tabulate and will have its own themes and so on. So what are we gaining from list tabulate?
Not having all the baggage of
okay,
dataset.
But that's
and also that, you know, if you're presenting an interface and what you want is really a grid, you know, a grid-like thing in your pretty printing, and not all of the baggage of
okay, the only reason we're talking about baggage is because of implementation.
No, it's not just the implementation. I mean, right, if you want something that you know, basically just looks like this, and does, you know, it doesn't respond in weird ways to clicks and whatnot, which are fundamentally part of the dataset interface.
Well, okay, the dataset interface, insofar as it's weird, that's a mistake.
Well, Stephen, can you open the page of capital D and go to the last neat example?
Yeah, okay. But I mean, yeah, I can do that. Just a second. This is, okay, so your point is this. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know. I mean,
right. So yeah, go to ref/d. That's
okay.
That's a good suggestion.
Can't imagine what I'm going to find there, but whatever. Why is the raft so running away? Okay, and go to where?
The last neat example.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is being able to construct something like that without having to introduce so much options, so many options.
I agree. But why isn't that working with dataset?
Well, because the typesetting is not going to be.
Why?
These.
I mean, it's just the same kind of idea.
No, I mean, there's no paging. There's no.
I understand that, but I'm saying that I don't think.
And you know, right, and I don't think dataset is going to take. Is dataset going to take foreground color and background color? And
yes, it is. That stuff it will take.
But for example, having dataset having this banding of alternate colors,
I don't see why we shouldn't support that in dataset with an option. I mean, if you want something which is a display, look, if the main issue is line printer paper, which is what you're basically saying there. Okay, so there's our thing. Now let me say that I say dataset of that. I may regret this, but let's just try it. Okay, it's not absolutely horrible. I mean, I would hardly argue
right, but now you've created this thing that is, you know, some semantic weird creature, and apparently that's not entitled correctly.
Listen. The fact that I can then go in and look at subparts of that is great. It's what I want.
It's maybe what you want, but it's not what people who want, you know.
Well, they don't have to do it if they don't want it, but if they do want it, it's right there. Look, I think the main point is, let's zoom out for a second, okay? The main point is tabulate and list tabulate have certain default formatting, which we like, right? The fact that I don't buy this argument of dataset has baggage they don't need. I think that baggage is perfectly useful. I think that if you don't need it, don't use it. I think the main argument is that the default formatting of tabulate, list tabulate, is different from the default formatting of dataset, okay? And is thought to be desirable. So it's as if we need a version of dataset that can support those different default formattings, which is not obviously crazy, but I think the way we need to think about this is at the beginning to just imagine, you know, supporting themes properly in dataset so that, you know, we can parameterize getting, you know, the different formatting that we want for tabulate. And then the question of whether we ultimately have a top level function that generates, whose role is, for example, tabulate, could generate a data set. with the formatting by default set to be this formatting that's thought to be more appropriate for tabulation.
No, I think that's a terrible idea.
Why?
Because, you know, I want to have, you know, reasonable grids and columns in my output.
Yes, I understand, but
Yeah.
but what if you want to do something with those grids and columns? Dataset provides a whole nice way of extracting pieces and doing things to those, you know, elements of the grid.
Sure, but if this is my final product, then this is
then
my
you don't care about the fact that, yes, it is the case. If you took that data set and you wanted to extract a piece of it,
right,
there are all kinds of ways to do it. Look, let's be realistic. You don't like the implementation of dataset, and we all agree, and that's why dataset is being redone. And you know,
well, well, let me put it this way: dataset, this can be done in much shorter time than redoing dataset. And
okay, that's not an you know, that's.
But also, you know, if I'm trying to create just sort of an interface, you know, dataset has all sorts of interactive behaviors. And
yes, which you could presumably switch off with different theme settings. Right? Look, the question, there are two orthogonal questions. One is the code base of dataset the right thing to be using to do this? And the answer, in my opinion, is it should be. If it isn't right now, that's because the code isn't good enough. Because what it will then support is all these different operations and all these different kinds of things that people will end up wanting for the tabulated output. That's point one. Point two is, should there be a top-level function called, for example, tabulate or tabulation or something, whose output is happens to be a data set, but it is one whose default theming is something closer to what we are currently imagining for Tabular? And I think the answer to that is probably yes. But it's a much simpler story to explain, because the thing you get out is a data set. You can extract pieces of it. You can select pieces of it. You can sort rows of it, you know, columns of it, all those kinds of good things. You know, you can sort by, for example, if you want to, you know, if I wanted to sort this thing by, I don't know, the length of the output, for example, which I might want to do, you know, I could you know, I don't want to have to go back to the list form, you know, extract the list out of the output, and then start doing things. We have a beautiful mechanism for doing that with dataset, which hopefully we will support increasingly through user assistance, you know, code completion type things. So anyway, I think that the takeaway from this, as I see it, is let's understand what was done in terms of formatting of this tabulate thing. Now, I think there was some other stuff done. What was done, Lou, what was done with the table view mechanism? That's yet a different branch, isn't it?
Table view is a completely separate effort.
Wonderful. A third such effort.
Well, but I mean, it has its own reason for being, right? Which is to give gridded input, bring that up to first-class citizenry.
Right. So in other words, it's a spreadsheet-like, enterable data set-like thing. Is that correct?
I wouldn't have added the word data set, but yes, it's
yes, I think it's without the word data set.
Yeah.
Okay. But then what does table view do? What does it return? Can I run it? Does it exist?
It exists. It's like input field.
So I can say experimental table view?
No, it's not experimental.
What is it?
It's just table view.
Really? Wow, it's a submarine function.
With a capital V.
Could we please cut the background noise? Thank you. Fascinating. Okay. Boy, people who are watching this live stream, here's a function you didn't know existed, probably. I didn't know this was at this stage of completion. What happens if I enter a string here? Wow, that's cool. Okay, what is that? Is that a symbol or is that a string?
I believe the default, so think of input field's second argument that allows you to specify what kinds of things you'd be typing. The default for table view is to allow strings and numbers.
Okay.
I don't know why
just happened here.
I don't know why this is not returning.
This might be why it's not documented yet. Right?
Yes.
And it goes directly to, right, I mean, that control there is a new front end, right? That's a table view box, I think, or, right? Is that the right?
That's right, yes.
If you unformat it, you'll see.
Okay. So how does this relate, and we should wrap this particular meeting, but how does this relate to any of the rest of what we're talking about? So, okay, what does this return? If this worked, what would it return?
It would return exactly what this is showing. Exactly as if you had evaluated an input field that you typed into. You would get back an input field. You know, you evaluate input field of dynamic of X, you get back an input field.
I see. So, but the setting of this is
setting is the data.
Okay.
And this would more typically be table view of dynamic of M. That would, formulate a dynamic binding between what you're editing and the state of some variable.
I see.
Yeah.
And what's the relationship between this and kind of spreadsheet entry and instant forms on the web and so on?
Well, I think the answer is we would need to finish table view box in the desktop front end, and then the cloud front end would need to learn about it as well.
But is that the right thing, or is that? I mean, because there's also, there's also all the recurring element stuff in interpreter, right? Repeating element, sorry, in interpreter. You know what I'm talking about there? The thing that's used, for example, if you're transporting stuff from Excel, it's using APIs with repeating element specifications. Actually, isn't it the thing that is the array interpreter thing? I don't know what's happened to this. Can I even kill it? Help! No. Well, you're right. That might be why it isn't released or documented. That is not a good sign, is it? Okay, but what I was talking about, what version of, maybe I'm even running the prototype build here and running this function in the prototype build, which is kind of crazy. Oh yeah, the array element function. Is it called? No, what is it called? Anybody know what I'm talking about? The thing that's been introduced for. Oh, rectangular repeating element, yeah. I mean, that's what this thing that you're showing is related to rectangular repeating element, because that's the thing that in a form or the input to an API specifies that you're bringing in a box like this. And I think there was an intention to have some kind of pure web JavaScript type yeah, but some interface that's pure web interface that allows you to enter these things as a way of in a form, bringing in rectangular repeating element. In fact, I wonder what the status of that is. Sushma, maybe you could check into that. That would be a Ricardo question.
Okay.
If I deploy a form with a rectangular repeating element, what does it actually come out like? I mean, I can just try it, I suppose. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. If I say X goes to repeating element, rectangular repeating element, what the heck? Oh, okay. Okay, let's see what this does. Fascinating. What the heck is that? Well, I don't know what this is going to do. Let's try this. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whatever. I'm totally confused. All right. Why don't you ask Ricardo what the story with this is?
Yes.
I mean, what this should do what that should do is to bring up some kind of spreadsheet-like interface.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we had agreed that we were going to do that with using some kind of JavaScript creature in the web interface here. But okay, but this, yeah. Okay, so this is a interface element-like thing. Wow. Well, even at a graphic design level, it has to be made to agree with the other things. Someone on the live stream is asking, can you reference one cell from another in that object?
Well, this will use the dynamic. The typical way one does that in Mathematica is via variable values. Yeah, and dynamic.
So you're saying that dynamic, given that this thing was bound to X, the whole thing was bound to X sub 4, 5 is the appropriate element.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
But the idea that, for example, one would have a particular element, you see, this is where the slippery slope starts sliding down the slippery slope, because then the next thing you're going to want is that element there is represented by a formula in terms of some of these other elements. And I don't know whether that's can be provided for in can it be in the context of dynamic? I suppose could it be? I mean,
it seems like it's a self-referential. We might run into referencing problems. These are definitely things that we would want to look into. I mean, this, as Itai says, there's a reason we're not shipping this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, we could imagine some sort of I don't know, computation function or something that continuously runs that forces certain cells to be constrained to be equal to some formula of in terms of other cells. But yeah, I mean, it's a sort of a different story. Fair enough. Okay. Great. We've gone over time here, so we need to wrap up. Sounds good. I think we got through our agenda. Thanks, guys. And thank you to people on the live stream. Thanks for the encouragement. Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
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 Bye.